Hello, BookTube. I have some new arrivals to show you. I've got 6 books here. 3 of them I've read, and 3 of them I have not read. And of the 3 that I have not read, we're going to see, we're going to determine maybe in the course of the video, whether or not any of them is going on the Friday reads that I am building before your eyes. So the first I want to show you the 3 that I've read. All 3 are recommendations of one level of intensity or another. First one is an author who writes military, ex-CIA, spy, adventure, urban thriller type things that you're going to love. If you don't read them, you're going to love them. This is an author I was introduced to because I was asked to review one of his books. I'd never heard of him before that, and it turns out I've heard a lot about him since then, or I hadn't paid attention. He wrote some comic books that I had read. I just hadn't paid attention. Who pays attention to writers? I pay attention to artists in comic books. But since then, I haven't missed anything, and oh boy. This is Greg Hurwitz. This is Into the Fire, and it's got a boring title, yes, and a boring cover, but it's an Orphan X novel. Orphan X is the nowhere man, a young man who was trained by the U.S. government in all kinds of skullduggery, from using his body as a lethal weapon to all kinds of espionage type skills, and then cut loose. So he was trained in all those things, and then he was cut loose. And it's a long and complicated story. I would urge you to find the first Orphan X novel. I wonder if they're listed in here. They must be. Yeah, okay. The first one is called Orphan X. So I urge you to find the first one of those and get the lay of the land there. But some of you will know the basic idea of that kind of a premise from The Gray Man. Mark Greeny's series The Gray Man also features someone who was first an asset and highly trained and then cut loose. And it creates a kind of unmoored character, very much in the line of Jack Reacher, someone who is off the grid for very good reasons, for reasons of self-preservation. It allows the author to create a world in which there are no acknowledged good guys except the main protagonist, where it's not a question of, like, for instance, what would be an example? Military thrillers where there's a maverick who breaks all the rules, but he's part of a system. He's part of a military or government system that is not presumed to be all evil. He has colleagues, he has friends, he has a system that is sponsoring him and working on his behalf. You know what I mean. Even James Bond. It's presumed that the rest of the spy organization that gave birth to James Bond is not entirely corrupt, although they often turn on him. They don't always turn on him. Whereas in things like The Gray Man or the Nowhere Man, that isn't true. So you not only have the bad guys, they're always just operatically comic booky bad guys in these books, deliciously so, but you also have the government, the people who trained the main character. Any one of them could turn on the main character at any time. The character is on their own, and that works. When it works really well. Greg Hurwitz really, really knows how to do this. So his books are fantastic. And this is the latest one. This comes out in January, I think. January 28th. And let me tell you a little bit about here. Evan Smoke lived by his own code. Once he was known as Orphan X, trained as an off-the-books government assassin and spoken about only in whispers. He was one of the most talented and most feared men in the program with a capital P. But he broke free and reinvented himself as the Nowhere Man, a figure shrouded in mystery, known for helping the truly desperate. And if anyone was truly desperate, it's Max Merriweather. Max is at the end of his rope. His cousin has been brutally murdered, leaving Max an envelope that contains nothing but a mysterious key. However, someone really wants that key, badly enough that Max and anyone he turns to is in deadly danger. What seems like a simple job for the Nowhere Man turns out to be anything but. Behind every threat he takes out, a deadlier one emerges. And that all sounds very cliche, and it is. The key that saves this is the key that would save any. All thrillers are ridiculously cliche. The thing that saves it is the energy and the chops of the writer. And in this case, I sing their praises. So that was that is one new arrival, and I don't think I've shown you another new arrival. I know that we've seen in an advanced copy. This is the finished copy. Is this a debut? No. Scott, it's a pen name for a New York Times best-selling author and screenwriter who lives in New England just above a dam. And I confess, when I get a book like that, part of the parlor game is to avoid internet speculation, avoid Reddit, avoid anything like that, and avoid simply asking the publicist or any of the other authors who work at this publishing house, and instead try to figure out from the pros who this author is. I have a couple of suspicions, but the pen name is Scott Carson, and the book is The Chill. We've already seen this in the advanced copy. It's also has a fairly hackneyed premise, especially if you're a fan of D-list, D-tier, old mass market paperback horror novels. A town buries, or an ordinance goes out to bury a town in upstate New York with a dam. And so the town is evacuated, the citizens are told to leave, and of course when you do something like that, you're going to have shambling water zombies. Because I don't know that there's ever been a documented case of a shambling water zombie, but in horror novels, in fiction of any kind, you're never going to flood a town without something horrible going wrong, and something horrible goes wrong here. And Scott Carson, the author, whoever the author may be, has a very sure sense of the beats of his stories. Very, very sure. That never goes wrong. So the mid-beat in any chapter, the stress points in any action scene, the end points of every chapter especially, are just perfectly done. So I have my suspicions about who this author is, but one thing you know for sure when you're reading this book is that you're reading a thriller by someone who has done this many times before, knows exactly what he's doing. And that's comforting. That's a nice feel. There are no amateurish mistakes here. There are no unfleshed out characters. There are no red herrings that go nowhere because the author forgets about them. There's nothing like that. Nothing like that happens. This is a rock solid quasi-supernatural thriller. You will not stop reading if you pick this one. And then the third one of the ones that I have read was a little bit of a shock to the system. When I am irrationally prejudiced against a particular figure or subject matter or period, I like to remain that way. And yet the pesky publishing industry continuously presents me with new books, and if they're good, then what happens? Then I have to change my mind. And that happened in this case, because I read a book on a subject for which I have very little other than scorn, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And you will too. I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is by Jonathan Horn, and this is Washington's End. This is a book about the last years of George Washington's life and his legacy, his immediate legacy. And not only is it tremendously good, tremendously insightful, but it's also eloquently written. That I don't know why, but I wasn't expecting that. It's eloquently written. The prose is very, very appealingly beautiful. So, the last of the 3 books for this New Arrivals video that I have read is the third recommendation, and it's me recommending a Washington book. Nevertheless, it brings the man more alive than the usual hagiography does. There are only tiny little germ threads of hagiography in this book. It's mostly, I think that the author's admiration of certain aspects of Washington's career, or especially his character, is actually genuine. And one of the reasons that I hate the hagiography that attends this character in other books is because you get the sense that the author doesn't believe it. You don't have to spend much time in the primary sources with George Washington before your admiration for him sort of fluctuates, I would say, to put it diplomatically, or drops right off the deep end. Well, I've only known a couple of people who delved into those deep archives and didn't experience that. The best-selling author, William Martin, being one of them. So Bill Martin wrote a book called Citizen Washington that's really, really good. One of the best historical novels about Washington, and came away a firm Washington admirer. Went in a firm Washington admirer and came out the same way. I don't know where I went wrong. but most people, the more they get to know this guy, instead of just dealing with the national platitudes, the less they like. And I don't get that impression here. And I don't, it's not hidden in any way. This is a warts and all portrait, but it's really good. I hate saying it, but nevertheless. So those are the three New Arrivals that I have read. And then there are 3 that I have not read. And I think one of these that I have not read, we have seen before. But we saw it only in its advanced copy. And it turns out the advanced copy was The Ugly Duckling, because the publisher has spared no expense for the finished copy. Finished copy is gorgeous. I think this is a debut. Yeah, this is a debut. This is by Justin Call. Some of you may have seen this on SFF 180. And Thomas couldn't help but comment on the beauty of the finished copy, and neither can I. This is Master of Sorrows. And it's just gorgeous. Just beautiful. The finished copy is just beautiful. The author lives with 2 big dogs, so Brian at Bookish will be happy. He lives in Park City, Utah with his wife and 2 sons, and his Great Dane Pippa and his St. Bernard Mastiff blend Herbie. So that's 400 pounds of dog. He's got one roaming around the house. And this is, you may remember the description that we saw of this originally. It's a high fantasy novel that has the usual cliched premise of one young man who is the chosen one, who is destined to discover sorcerer's powers that no one else has, that he has to learn how to use, and he has a mentor to help him with that. But what happens if that young man is actually the bad guy? This sort of takes off from there. It won't stick to its guns, of course. He will end up either having a change of heart or changing his heart himself. It won't have, I don't think, I haven't read it. It's a debut, though, and I don't think it will have the courage of its convictions. This won't be a book about a bad guy by the end, by page 600, or however long this is. This is 550 pages long. But it's on the launch pad. So this is a very strong candidate. This comes out, okay, I don't have a sheet for it, but it's soon. It's a February release, probably. Oh no, this might be a January release. This might be the January 28th. I don't remember the date on it, but it's real soon. And so this is probably going to go on the Friday Reads pile that I am slowly constructing out of these videos. This probably will, because it's close. I've got a finished copy. I tend to read finished copies before I read advanced copies, that sort of thing. But these next 2 tempt me a lot. The next one that I haven't read, let me show you this thing. This is, I think, going to be a paperback original, which is kind of rare for history. Yeah, this is going to be a paperback original. It's not going to be cheap. It's going to be $35. But it comes out in early February. It's by Tanvi Madan, and it's called Fateful Triangle: How China Shaped U.S.-India Relations During the Cold War. And there you have a whole bunch of people that I know really well. So let's see what we have here. Do we have a description? This is going to be a paperback original. If the 20th century was the American century, then surely the 21st century is poised to be the Asian century, with the economic growth and prosperity of China and India. A key question today is whether the United States and India can or should develop ever closer ties as a way of countering China's desire to be the dominant power in a broader Asian region. The answer to that question is obviously yes, but a desire to offset China brought the 2 countries closer together in the past and could do so again. And this is the story of that relationship, of that 3-way relationship in its formative years. And it's heavily researched, heavily annotated. So I mentioned the date, right? This comes out soon. Yeah, February 4th. So this is also a strong candidate for a Friday Reads, because it's coming right up. It's not going to have a finished copy. This is the finished copy. So God only knows what kind of representation this will get in your bookstore. It's a Brookings Institute trade paperback for $35. I wouldn't be surprised if your bookstore doesn't even order it. But at least you know it exists. So if you're interested in, for instance, the bulk of this thing is probably the Nixon era, for good reason. If you're interested in this kind of thing, and U.S.-India relationships are fascinating, lots of big, powerful personalities on both sides, then at least you know this book exists, and your bookstore can order it. I'm sure it's distributed by Baker and Taylor and Ingram, so I'm sure that you can get it. But I don't know. Does this strike you as the type of thing that would be stacked in paperbacks on your paperback new release table at your bookstore? It certainly isn't in mine. But this is a strong candidate because it's right around the corner. And then the last one comes out in April, which ordinarily wouldn't make it a strong candidate at all, but it is mighty tempting. It is mighty tempting. Some of you will know why. Some of you will know this author. This is called Radical Wordsworth, the Poet Who Changed the World, and it's by Jonathan Bate, the great Jonathan Bate. Let me read you about this. On the 200th anniversary of Wordsworth's birth comes a highly imaginative and vivid portrait of a revolutionary poet who embodied the spirit of his age. Published in time for the 200th anniversary of Wordsworth's birth, this is a biography of a great poetic genius, a revolutionary who changed the world. Wordsworth rejoiced in the French Revolution and played a central role in the cultural upheaval of what we call the Romantic Revolution. So it's a thing that, as he got much, much older and fussed around with his poetry, people tended to forget the revolutionary Wordsworth, who was the one that rocketed to everybody's attention at the time. He and his fellow romantics changed forever the way we think about childhood, the sense of ourself, our connection with the natural environment, and the purpose of poetry. But he was also a revolutionary life, in the old sense of the term, insofar as that his art was of memory, the return of the past, the circling back to childhood and youth. This beautifully written biography is purposely fragmentary, momentary, and selective, opening up what Wordsworth called the, quote, hiding places of my power. And Jonathan Bate is a foundation professor of environmental humanities at Arizona State University and a senior research fellow at Oxford University. This comes out in late April. Of course, that biography doesn't do Jonathan Bate justice, but his listing here of things that he has written will, because look at this. He's got 20 books that he has either written or edited. Wrote a biography of John Clare. Tons of books on Shakespeare, a biography of Ted Hughes. So this is awful tempting, but I even as tempting it is, I think I will probably wait until I get a finished copy. I'll probably wait a bit. But I wanted you to know it was there because some of you are going to want to put this on your TBR or keep an eye out for your library. In fact, tell your library to order it now so you can be first on the list. So there you go. Those are some new arrivals and potential candidates for a Friday Reads. So we have Radical Wordsworth. We have Fateful Triangle, which is going to be an expensive paperback. This is not the advanced copy. Then Master of Sorrows with tons of gold leaf. Big fantasy novel. Then these aren't candidates because these have already been read. Washington's End by Jonathan Horn. A strong recommendation, believe it or not. Then Into the Fire, Greg Hurwitz. Also a strong recommendation. The Nowhere Man novels are well worth your time if you love series of thrillers. Well worth your time. And also The Chill by Scott Carson. Classic haunted reservoir novel that is nevertheless really good. And there you go. Those are some new arrivals and some new candidates for the Friday Reads that I'm building in front of you. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.